Everyone, it's time for another edition of Beaver Banter.
Beaver Sports Talk lives here.
It is the Beaver Banter podcast presented by Bemidji State Alumni and Foundation. I'm CJ Baumgartner. There is Ian Rivers, and hockey trades, turnaround points, other Bemidji State Beaver notes, all coming up in the show. We're going to talk about men's hockey and their free fall. Is there hope? Looking at just another tough weekend ahead for women's hockey, and we're covering some sweeps from men's and women's basketball and where things can be all right and where we're going to need to see what's happening. But Ian, I think the biggest thing we do need to lead the show off with is a Beaver in the pros and former Bemidji State Beaver and classmate of ours, Zach Whitecloud. Ian, this trade broke kind of within the last hour here before we hit record. What do we need to know?
Yeah, Zach Whitecloud has been shipped off. He is finally free, or I should say we are finally free of the shackles of having to cheer a little bit for the Vegas Golden Knights. He's been included in a trade for I actually don't have the trade in front of me. I can't remember the player.
The Vegas Golden Knights have acquired Rasmus Anderson.
That's
from
right.
the Calgary Flames. Jeez, I can't talk today. Calgary Flames for Zach Whitecloud, 2 draft picks, and prospect Abram Wiebe. So that's the official trade there. And Ian, just again, like you said, we're free of having to kind of not wish complete and total bad things to happen to the Vegas Golden Knights. Because every time it'd be like, I hope Vegas loses. And then I go, but they got Zach Whitecloud. And I do like Zach Whitecloud. So I kind of like, if they win, I guess I'm not super mad. Now, if they win, you could be upset. If they win, or if they lose, you can fully revel in their downfall, which everybody loves to do with the Vegas Golden Knights. But the one thing about Zach Whitecloud that I think we like to talk about on the show, not only that we're classmates with them and we're in that same class with NFL punt returner Gunnar Olszewski as well, is the fact that Zach Whitecloud got to hold the Stanley Cup and pretty much went right to the NHL from his time at Bemidji State, which is just something really, really cool and a sticking point for Bemidji State men's hockey, that no matter how the team does on the ice in a current season, and we'll talk about that in a second about how things aren't going great, at least you can say, yeah, but Zach Whitecloud plays NHL hockey, and I remember watching him for the Beavs.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's cool. Like you said, CJ, we don't have to ever wish good things for the Vegas Golden Knights again. Calgary is a little bit more, neutral, I'm sure, in a lot of the Minnesotans' hearts, Wild fans' hearts. And it's a reason to update your jersey collection. The Flames do have a pretty good jersey. I really like their logo. It's cool. Zach, of course, getting to lift the Stanley Cup now takes his talents to Calgary, where, at the end of the day, maybe you see him get a little bit more like special teams opportunity, maybe a little bit more power play or penalty kill time than he had in Vegas, who was just pretty loaded almost every year. And he kind of just got buried on the third defensive line, or pairing, I should say. If not, even lower than that sometimes. So it's a cool opportunity for him back in Canada, where he is, of course, native to. Like we talked about, he's been in Vegas for a while, so it's not like he hadn't acclimated to the culture there. But, the Canadian guy's probably a little bit thrilled to be back playing in Canada again.
Yeah, exactly. The problem is the Flames, the Flames, they have 47 points in the Pacific Division right now. Vegas, the team he got traded from, was leading the division with 60 points. So, not
a little bit of ground to make up.
Little bit of ground.
That's why they traded for him, though. They needed,
exactly.
They needed a defensive boost.
He was part of the turnaround.
Whitecloud was the trade. They weren't looking to unload Anderson. They were looking to get Zach Whitecloud in the deal.
Exactly. He's like what Zeev was in the Hughes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
It wasn't like the Strum of the deal or the Marco Rossi or something like that. So that's at least what I'm going to tell myself. Anyway, congrats to Zach on the new digs, I guess. And like you said, hopefully it leads to a little bit more of a role for him. And, he definitely served it well. And there were people in Vegas and even people who weren't covering Vegas specifically and just covered the NHL as a whole that appreciated what he did in his role and helping them win a Stanley Cup. And it's just really, really cool. And now we can go back to officially fully hate watching the Vegas Golden Knights. So has there ever been a team that's come onto the scene and been hated so quickly as the Vegas Golden Knights? Not even for the early success that they had, but just for the fact that like they immediately just became an unlikable team.
I don't know. Not that I can imagine. Like, if you're talking in terms strictly of like just an expansion franchise that came in and was just hated instantly, like, no, absolutely not. I think they're pretty much one of one in that category. I can't actually think of another expansion franchise off the top of my head that's
like
and of
Seattle's
course
been around for a while, and they're just kind of they just exist. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, and Utah isn't even an expansion franchise that just moved. So it's like, and every other sport, I feel like most of the expansion franchises, I was either way too young or not even born yet by the time a lot of them, were
Right. Like if we
were
go to the
popping
Houston
up.
Texans in the NFL, they were so bad for so long that when they finally got good, you're like, good for you.
Yeah. Well, and
You know,
even then I was like 5 years old when they when they became a thing. So I didn't really have I
right.
didn't know hate yet. That hadn't been instilled quite yet.
Right, exactly. So I don't know how, but they found themselves to become instantly unlikable immediately after they're, made the cup in the first season, which, you know, must be nice to win a playoff series. Anyway, so looking at some other things we need to talk about, Ian, we will talk about Bemidji State men's hockey and the absolute free fall they're in the CCHA and how they can pick things back up, recapping women's hockey, and then, of course, some sweeps that were dealt to Bemidji State men's and women's basketball, and a little indoor track and field recap. But first, Ian, we're going to talk about the presenting sponsor of the Beaver Banter podcast. It's Bemidji State Alumni and Foundation. Once a Beaver, always a Beaver. The Bemidji State Alumni and Foundation is here to keep that green and white pride going strong for its 50,000 graduates around the world. From scholarships that open doors for students to events that bring BSU alumni and friends together, you can get connected, give back, and leave a legacy at Bemidji State. Whether you're a proud BSU grad, a local supporter, or just love cheering on the Beavers, come be a part of the action at bsualumni.org. That's bsualumni.org. Bemidji State Alumni and Foundation, proud supporters of the Beaver Banter podcast, as we've talked about some great alumni for Bemidji State in Zach Whitecloud. And of course, there's a whole bunch of great alumni in other parts of the university, not just in athletics, that they do a great job highlighting and just giving them the spotlight, which is awesome. And, talking with Micah recently of the Bemidji State Alumni and Foundation, I'm going to get him on the show and talking with him. And obviously he's got some great BSU trivia and other things that is just really insightful to know. And, his Seattle Seahawks are doing pretty well. So that's it's good for him. So, all right. Moving things along, Ian, on the Beaver Banter podcast, we are talking about the men's hockey team and the absolute free fall that they're in. Not only, Ian, have they dropped their last 3 conference series or not gotten a point in their last 2 conference series at all, but in the last time Bemidji State men's hockey has won back-to-back games in regulation, or just back-to-back in general, was November 21st and 22nd at home against Northern Michigan. Things aren't great, man. Just let's start off with, that's the big picture. Let's zoom in and talk about the weekend series against St. Thomas, a team that in men's hockey, Bemidji State usually has the number of the Tommies, especially when it was on the road in St. Paul. But now in the new arena, St. Thomas definitely had their way with Bemidji State this weekend.
Yeah, that was a difficult one to watch. I'm not going to lie. It was more of the same. You'd hoped that it was just a little rust against Michigan Tech, and you were going to rebound against a team in St. Thomas that you've really played well against for a majority of your Division I era rivalry. And it just wasn't the case. I mean, Friday was almost a complete disaster from the first period on. You have another first period where you start in a multiple goal hole. I mean, you get off to a good start and get a power play, and you give up a shorthanded goal less than 3 minutes into the game, courtesy of, guess who, Lucas Wallen. And then Jake Brasini gets a goal right before the end of the period to make it 2-0 on the power play. It's just just nasty stuff starting off that game, unfortunately, defensively. Torrey Lund made it 2-1, and you're like, all right, maybe this is the goal that kind of rights the ship, gets us back, and it just wasn't meant to be. From then on, 3-1 heading into the third period for St. Thomas, and then 5-1 at the end of the game after a couple of third period power play goals. St. Thomas on the day, 3 of 6 on the power play. That's just a 50% penalty kill. The Beavers 0 of 5 on Friday evening. And the power play and the penalty kill have been an especially nasty talking point for this team, especially since coming back from the break. Beavers actually got off to a pretty good start on Saturday, and they played a really good first period, I thought. Again, it's one of those things where it's like, you want to be super, super positive about the way that they played in the first period, just because of the fact that they were leading, but you felt like it could have been so much more. Refereeing was a huge talking point on Saturday. There was a total of I think 14 penalties, 9 of them on St. Thomas, a couple of 5-minute majors in this game, I believe, at least one called against St. Thomas. And that was the only time the Beavers got a power play goal in the whole game. They went 1 of 9 in this game. And they gave up yet another shorty. And so on the weekend, you combine that 1 of 9 with 0 of 5, and that's 1 of 14 on the weekend on the power play. And you actually had a minus because you gave up 2 goals while you were on a power play. And that's just brutal. I mean, you just cannot have that, happen. It's been abysmal. They didn't have a good power play against Michigan Tech. They didn't have a good power play against, St. Thomas, and they didn't have a good penalty kill against St. Thomas. St. Thomas went 1 of 5 on Saturday night. So you combine 1 of 5 with 3 of 6, and that's, 4 of 11. That's sitting a little bit under 40%, which is still insanely good. And of course, it's just a 1 weekend sample size, but you can't play that poorly on special teams and expect to win the game. You get 9 opportunities in a game to score a power play goal. A lot of them were either broken penalties because, they would take a penalty on, when they were on the power play, on even the score up, or they would just, not end up being, full penalty opportunities. Just not good enough. Now they've dropped 4 of 4 since the new year started. Obviously, of course, the exhibition against the Gophers, they get a tie, but that doesn't mean anything to me at this point after 4 straight losses. And it doesn't get any easier with Bowling Green coming into town.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, you can't put yourself in that position to be down early, especially against a team like St. Thomas that was ranked in the top 20, and expect things to really end well for you, especially on the road. And we've talked about it before. It's just not the game that Bemidji State is built to play, being down from behind. They're meant to play the other ways to get that early goal and to kind of run away and hide with the game a little bit. I'm oversimplifying it, but that's basically the thing to happen. And Ian, this is something that I've kind of been tracking. I don't know why this has been the stat I've just been really leaning into lately, but if you look at the goals for and goals against, Bemidji State has in CCHA play, which, overall they're +1 in goal differential, but really focusing on conference play here. Bemidji State is +3 in goals forced goals scored compared to goals allowed. 47-44 is the ratio. But I want to look at the goals scored for a second. And I know, special teams play into that, and there's some other things that go into that. But Bemidji State's 44 goals allowed. If you rank that, only 2 teams in the CCHA have given up more goals, and that's been Ferris State and Northern Michigan. Now, they're not anywhere close to those 2 teams. Northern Michigan has given up 10 more goals than the Beavers have, and 31 more. Ferris State has given up 75 goals on the season, which is in conference play in 18 games, which is insane. But that's the stat that's really just been clinging on to me. The offense has been okay overall when you look at, they've scored more goals in conference play than Minnesota State, and they're at the and Augustana. But overall, I think it's just been the fact that Bemidji State hasn't been able to put themselves in these great positions. And then you talk about getting down early and goaltending, whether it's defensive, whether it's goaltending, I'm not pinning that on either one. Would you say that there's one that leads more into the other, or has it been kind of both sides sharing the blame on that defensive end?
I would say it's both, a little bit. To an extent, I think the defense has been pretty poor, especially over this last 2 weeks. But there's instances almost every weekend, I feel like, where the Beavers will get a breakaway opportunity to score a goal. Like Oliver Peer had one, I believe, on Saturday, where he didn't score. And you're not going to score 100% of breakaways. The other goalie has an opportunity to make a save. But guess what St. Thomas didn't do? They didn't allow a goal and they didn't give up a penalty. And I feel like every time that the Beavers have a skater going in 1-on-0 against Robbins or Hildebrand, the goalie either lets it pass him or the defenseman decides he wants to take a penalty rather than just let his goaltender try to make a play. Whatever it is, we always seem to take the penalty in that shot, in that situation, or give up the goal, and we just can't get them on the other end. We've had so many opportunities at breakaway goals this year, and they just haven't been able to convert them. But yeah, defensively, it's just been poor. We've given up so many breakaways. I don't know if there's a stat for that or what, but dude, it feels like every game, all these shorthanded goals are coming because our defensemen are trying to jump up into the play, on the power play and try to pinch the puck, and they just don't do it. And then guess what? It's 1-on-0 the other way or 2-on-1 the other way because the other defenseman's trying to get back, or the other offenseman, if it's four offensive players on the power play, and it's just not a good matchup at a 2-on-1 at the other end. So it creates a lot of odd man rushes. I don't know if they're trying to make a point to be more aggressive and pinch those plays more often, but goaltending definitely hasn't been as good as you'd hoped. I mean, I just think in general, I had a small conversation with Lucas Beaver Territory in the Beaver Banter Discord, which you should join, especially even in times of tough times like this for Beaver Athletics. It's still good. You get all the insight during games, after games. And it's just kind of a matter of, were the Beavers getting lucky earlier this season? And, we played in a lot of overtime games. We had a lot of shootout wins. We won a lot of overtime games. And maybe we're just thinking about the season completely differently if we enter the second half, if we had maybe lost some of those shootouts and lost those games in overtime. And we did lose a game or two in overtime, but at the end of the day, you're picking up a lot of extra points off of overtime games. And yes, when you talk about winning games, that's good because you're getting a majority of points. But like you talked about, CJ, goal differential, you're winning a lot of one-goal games and close games, and it's just not quite as intrinsic of a super, talented hockey team, which I do believe we have plenty of offensive talent. It's just not clicking right now as much as we need it to. So I think that we were punching maybe a bit above our weight in the first half, and now we're definitely punching below our weight. Like, this isn't the team that I think we are or can be. We're definitely below expectations right now. And I think that we can get back to maybe even just a little bit of a median, even if we aren't winning all these one-score games. But there was definitely maybe some regression to the mean coming after such a lucky first half.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned with kind of the opportunities and trying to get things to click. If you look at shots on goal, shots per game, kind of that stat, Bemidji State has 29 shots on goal, which averaging per game, which is fourth in the CCHA. Only Minnesota State, St. Thomas, and Bowling Green, who's tops in the conference and getting shots off, which is going to be important this weekend as we talk about that series with Bowling Green coming up at the Sanford Center. When you look at shot percentage, Bemidji State is third overall in the conference in shots percentage, and in shots overall, Bemidji State is only 697 in getting those shots off. So it's, again, trying to get a little bit more opportunities. Now they're getting shots on goal rather than just flinging it at the net, but you know what I mean? Some of that stuff to look into. Ian, projecting forward, for Bemidji State, for that series against Bowling Green, let's just take a look here and kind of look at what Bemidji State is going to need to make sure that they take advantage of. Because when you look for Bowling Green, when you look at the penalties per game, Bowling Green takes about 5 penalties a game. So they are a team that is going to be kind of up there. Now, when you look at the minutes they take, they average about 15 minutes per game in the penalty box. So that is going to be something to try and keep an eye on in this game. So the Beavers were not able to do it last weekend and taking advantage on special teams. They will more than likely have an opportunity to try and turn that around this weekend. When you look at the face-off winning percentage, Bowling Green is kind of in their own league. They're winning 54.6% of face-offs. Michigan Tech is the next closest with 49.7. So a sizable gap between those numbers. Bemidji State is tied for third with Minnesota State with a 496 percentage there, 49.6 in that face-off winning percentage. So winning those face-offs, or at least making sure you don't get completely dominated in that, is going to be huge for the Beavers. And then taking advantage of those special teams opportunities when they arise, most likely, is going to be a big key to success for Bemidji State men's hockey to try and turn things around. And if they can split and this weekend series, Ian, some things really do open up when they go to Northern Michigan and then host Ferris State.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I think unless you have some sort of a miraculous, like you would need to get like 3 straight sweeps, like sweep Bowling Green and then take care of business against Ferris and Northern Michigan coming down the pipeline here in the next 3 weeks. Then we can maybe start talking about scenarios where you're hoisting McNaughton Cup again. But right now you're in 6th place, and Lake Superior State's kind of chomping at the bit to try to get a chance at you. Obviously, you don't play them again. Yeah, they're only, again, yes, like you said, CJ, they're only 5 points back. They don't get another chance to play you. But if you keep dropping points like this, like they're not that far off. Like you need to kind of stave them off. And if you want to get home ice, I think that 3 points is the bare minimum this weekend. And then you really do still have to take care of business against those teams down at the bottom in the next couple of weeks. Yeah, special teams is just going to be huge this weekend, especially. Like it was big last weekend with the amount of penalties that were taken. You went 1 of 14 on the penalty kill or on the power play. I'm sorry, 1 of 14 on the penalty kill would be abysmal, man. But yeah, you have the 6th ranked power play and 6th ranked penalty kill in the conference. Bowling Green has the 6th ranked penalty kill the 3rd ranked penalty kill and the 3rd ranked power play. So polar opposites these teams are in terms of where their special teams are at. You're sitting at a 17% clip on your power play. And this was a power play unit that we were talking about in a pretty good light. Like after the non-conference schedule had kind of ended against St. Cloud and UMD, it had kind of turned itself back around. And we were like, oh yeah, the penalty kill has actually been a lot better since we had to play those teams. And the power play has been surging lately. And it's just completely fallen off a cliff yet again. So 17%, not great. You really need to have an opportunity this weekend. And like you said, CJ, they will probably have opportunities. Bowling Green does spend a lot of time in the box, but I don't know. I don't know how much faith I have in them to convert on those chances when you just saw 14 opportunities and only had 1 goal last weekend. But at the end of the day, that's what it's going to come down to.
Now they're going to go 13 for 14, right?
Oh God. I mean, I can't even imagine how you'd probably win, assuming that that's over the course of 5 or 6 games that you get 14 opportunities in. Like you probably are going to win most of those games if you can actually convert almost every time that you get a power play. But I'm not going to hold my breath for that. But we'll see. It's such a huge point in every series. Trying to play clean hockey. You did take 11 penalties this last weekend. Not great. You don't want to be up at 5 penalties a game or more. So if they can play a little bit cleaner and, just do what they can to try to support the goalie behind them. Like, I don't know. We'll see how it goes. They are back at home. I do believe they're going to be wearing the Paul and Babe jerseys that they debuted last year. Of course, last year did not go well in that jersey for the team. I believe they were playing Ferris State the weekend that they debuted, and they got swept on home ice. So hopefully the bad juju is all worn off, and the jerseys can make a better debut this season because they are really nice looking jerseys. So if you want to see those, of course, get out to the rink. There's only a select number of home series left, especially if this team can't get themselves in gear and try to find some home ice in the playoffs. But
only 3 home series left, which is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's winding down. We're in mid to late January at this point. It's flying by.
Yeah. All right, Ian, let's talk a little women's hockey here. And I don't think we need to get too deep in the weeds on this. We talked about it was tough playing the Gophers. You were going to, nobody was expecting you to come away with the sweep. But I think everybody's just expecting, hey, can you hold your own? And Friday night looked good. A 5-3 loss, not the ideal scenario. But hey, box score watching, you go, hey, you're right in the ballpark. You're right there. And then Saturday, the wheels came off and they lost 11-1. And sometimes it be like that. There's not much more you can say other than whatever pucks and sticks you were using, maybe bury them somewhere and just kind of forget about them and go get new gear and just kind of move on, because things are not getting any easier this weekend with a road trip to number 1 Wisconsin on Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah. That's kind of the nature of the WCHA right now. Bemidji State has not been able to find their footing. And yeah, I mean, Friday, it was fine, from a end of game perspective, but considering they were trailing 5-0 with 15 minutes left in the game, 5-3 is, Haley Armstrong, Izzy Fairchild, and Shelby Sandberg got goals in that game. Sandberg's came with just 35 seconds left in the game to make it 5-3. But congrats to the goal scorers in that one. And then, 11-1, the second night. And yeah, I mean, it's disappointing regardless of the fact that it's Minnesota to give up 11 goals on home ice. But it's just kind of the nature of the beast at this point. Shorthanded goals scored by Morgan Smith to cut the deficit to 9-1. If I'm going to reference the old Chris Paul meme, where he hits a huge 3 to cut the lead to 43 or whatever it is. Rough weekend, and it's a tough opponent, like nothing that's not happened before. And like you said, CJ, you get to, I believe, go to Madison this weekend.
To you celebrate. Get the great prize of improving from taking on the third best team in the country to the first team in the country. So there is no easy weekends in the WCHA,
Yeah. See what you can do. You have a bar, let's try not to go below that, I guess. Let's see if the offense can keep producing. That 3 goals is, regardless of whether or not the game was in hand at that point, 3 goals against the Gophers is pretty good. So see if you can't do something similar to that this weekend.
Let Haley Armstrong do Haley Armstrong things, and we'll just kind of see how it plays out. All right, Ian, let's talk a little basketball for men's and women's as we continue here the show. But first, let's thank our sponsors, Bemidji State Alumni and Foundation.
Do you want to be a part of the team behind the teams at Bemidji State? Join hundreds of dedicated fans when you donate to Beaver Athletics and help BSU pursue its next championship. Your gift can power your favorite program, establish a scholarship for a student athlete you get to meet, and so much more. Every dollar brings the Beavers closer to raising another trophy. You can add to the proud tradition of success at Bemidji State. So don't wait. Give today at bsualumni.org/Beavers. That's BSUALUMNI.org/BEAVERS.
All right, Ian, this happens. There's a lot of games that happen. There's a lot of things that go, but no Bemidji State team sport won this weekend. So we're down the barrel of an 0-8 weekend, and it continues when you look at men's basketball. They had a weekend where you thought, hey, could you get a split? Could you do this? Could you do that? And had an opportunity against St. Cloud State going down there. Not the easiest place in the world to play, but overall just not the best shooting night, shooting 33% from the field. And Ian, they shot 7% from 3. And that's just kind of how things sat in the game. And, they had a 40-point first half that they allowed against the Huskies. And while the second half, the Beavers chipped into it a little bit, with the shooting night they had, allowing 40 points in the first half, you're just putting yourself at a really bad advantage. Henry Shannon, the leading scorer with 14, John Pekarich with 13, and Austin Josephson with 11 points. So overall, Ian, as we talked about, and again, defensively, shooting overall in the night, St. Cloud State shot 34% from the field. So it's not like things were that different. The rebounding battle was even. St. Cloud State shot a little better at the free throw line. Turnovers were even. So overall, this is just one of those games where the free throw line played big, and Bemidji State just couldn't shoot. When you look at the 3-point percentage, 24% from 3 to 7% from 3, and that's kind of what made the difference. So overall, not the best game on Friday night.
No, and it's unfortunate, that you played this team kind of reminds me of like Denver Broncos, like from a standpoint of like, not that they're the 1 seed in the conference, but that they are like playing to the level of the opponent, like each night. Like you look at some of these nights where they have really good, or decent defensive performances and only allowing 66 points, but then they only score 55, and then the next night they go and they allow 98 points, but they put up a decent 83 points on offense. And so it's like, man, they're just kind of back and forth. You look at the Sioux Falls game, they allowed 97 points, but they scored 94. And that's kind of been the case on a couple of different occasions this year. Yeah, 7%, that's going to play a huge part in this game. It's unfortunate that you couldn't come away with a better result. This was the top team in the NSIC South.
Right. They're 9-2 overall, 12-5 after that one. So
yeah, a loss isn't necessarily the most surprising thing. You only lose by 11 and you're like, all right, well, we shot 7% from 3. Like, man, we would have upped that by even just 20%. Like 27% is still not great, but better than 7. And that does, like you said, make a huge difference in a game that's only decided by about 10 points.
They were 1 of 14 from the 3-point line in that game.
Yeah.
So they got 30 points in the paint, which is great, but no outside shooting to help kind of supplement that. And that's where things stand. So Bemidji State then flipped over, like you said, and had an 83-point performance, including 52 in the second half. But the problem is they were down 52-31 at halftime. So it's, again, finding a way in these first halves. It just feels like Bemidji State, whether it's like, again, I have this a long amount of time in basketball. That's 20 whole minutes of game time. So, in quarters, it's a little easier to kind of break it down. But these first half starting games, really trying to find a way to keep yourself in it going into the locker room at halftime. Over the last few weeks, Ian, it's kind of been that narrative of the first half play has really kind of done themselves a disservice in trying to stay in these games. And for Bemidji State, and I know this is something we've talked to coaches on the staff about in the rebounding battle, they lost it 38-20, and allowing those more opportunities or not allowing yourself second chance points on offense and things like that, even though you had a great bounce back game from the field, shooting 52%, 46% from 3. They found the buckets, but unfortunately couldn't win the boards, and that allowed Mankato, who overall shot 58% from the field and 53% from 3. When you score 98 points, you're going to do that. And then winning the rebounding battle is just going to help yourself, give you extra possessions. And unfortunately, Bemidji State not able to play. And again, 44 points in the paint for Minnesota State really was the difference in that one. So that's how things stand with Bemidji State in that weekend. And, we felt like this was the more winnable one with Minnesota State. They're only 11-9 overall, 5-7 in the NSIC, and maybe an opportunity to get a win and build up some momentum in the conference. And that just hasn't quite been the case. Now they have an opportunity to do that playing Concordia St. Paul and Winona State. But again, those two teams have been pretty good, generally speaking.
Yeah, Winona this year is having a down year, 4-8, last place in the NSIC South, just 5-12 overall. So that's an opportunity. And like we talked about last week, you're in a tie right now for that playoff cutoff with UMary at 3-9 in the NSIC North, and any win you can pick up in the South Division, which has so far been, I believe, 0, unfortunately. I do believe you have 4 more opportunities. So you played half of the South so far. 4 more opportunities to get any wins you can against the South Division
and they're
before
the next
you restart. Yeah, exactly. Next 4 games in a row. So these ones are at home. They're going to be big. Concordians mediocre this year, around middle of the pack in the South, but a little bit better than where Beavers are at. And of course, like, we could sit here and talk about the injury to Tate Olson every week if we really wanted to. And that's been a big part of why the Beavers have lost these close games, because there have been opportunities here and there. They've lost quite a few games by less than 10 points or even 11 points if you want to count the St. Cloud State game. How much of a difference does Tate make? Who knows? But at the end of the day,
right,
gonna have to find a way to do it without him.
And you're correct in that point, Ian, because it's like that. It's just thrown a wrench in that he got hurt against UMD, and I think as a fan, you're hoping at some point maybe he could come back for a stretch run, but what his senior season, I guess he could apply for a medical red shirt and you could see how things happen there, but it's a bummer for that aspect, and we'll see what happens. But there you lose him, and that's a big part of your identity and things you wanted to build around. And that's important in the same way Sutherland was hurt last year for the men's basketball team. So they've been bitten with some of their best players by the injury bug, which has shook things up. But, also I think the coaching staffs themselves would say it. Well, that's true. They've also had plenty of time now to learn how to play without him. And obviously he's your best player, and there's not a player of his caliber that you can just throw right back in. But they've at least, it's not like this is, one weekend where you've had to kind of learn it on the fly. This has been pretty much all conference play. And I think as a BSU fan, you're hoping that they can find some way to pull some more wins out. And even if you can't go undefeated, which nobody's expecting the rest of the way, but can you at least kind of find yourselves in more competitive games coming into half and going down the stretch, and things like that would be huge for this team against some more winnable opponents in the South. So, only, by the way, 5 more home games for Bemidji State men's and women's basketball. So down to the stretch run.
Yeah.
Looking at women's basketball, Ian, again, they unfortunately got swept. They played St. Cloud State and had a 77-56 loss on Friday, a 94-69 loss to Minnesota State Mankato. The Mankato one, it's going to happen. They're a great team. You had a good offensive input, which I think is better than the 56, just a better sign than the 56-point output you had on Friday night. So you kind of leave that one to what it'll be. But when you look at their matchup against St. Cloud State, that was a team that was 3-8 in conference play. And I think you were hoping that things could get a little better. But again, that one quarter, the second quarter, was this time where you got outscored by 20 points. And that's
23, man. That's crazy. I mean, if you combine the other 3 quarters, they only lost the game by 2.
Right.
And then it's that one quarter. And listen, dude, we have talked not ad nauseum about Mankato's success in women's hoops this year. They're a damn good team. But yeah, I mean, losing a quarter by 23 is tough to any opponent. But yeah, I would say, CJ, that the St. Cloud State game is definitely the more disappointing one on the weekend. It's a team that came in really, really poor. If you look at the NSIC South standings, they're second last at just 3-9 now. And you lost to them by 21. Just probably not the result that they're hoping for. Now, the team's still in a pretty decent position to succeed. They're still sitting in 6th place in a very close race. Like, they could come out and sweep this weekend against, the same opponents, Concordia, St. Paul, and Winona State, who are, decent opponents. But I don't know. We've seen this team play pretty well so far this season. It wouldn't shock me if they came out and split this weekend or even got a sweep. They could be right back in it in terms of getting a home playoff game, even in the NSIC North. But again, it's a similar situation to the men's team where you kind of just want to put yourself in a good situation. Because I do feel like if they can steal a couple of wins here, like I said, with 4 games to go against the NSIC South, you've got that 7-game stretch at the end of the season where if you really pick up steam, you could be hosting a playoff game at, the BSU gymnasium come playoff time, because it's a tight race between like 3 and 6 right now in the NSIC North. So the Beavers looking to pick up a couple more wins this weekend. It's definitely possible. It's tough opponents, but you're at home. I think you'll be a little bit motivated coming off a couple of tough losses.
Yeah, exactly. I think that motivation factor will help. And I think that overall, again, another opportunity to turn themselves back out. You have Concordia, St. Paul, Winona State coming to town, and we'll see what happens. So again, they only have 5 more home games left. So if you're looking for a weekend to go to the BSU gymnasium, check out a game, only got a couple more. So be sure to take advantage of that. All right, Ian, as we try and wrap things up in the show here, let's talk a little bit about the BSU women's track and field team. They had their first meet of 2026. It was at the Twin Ports Open. They had eight competitors, in the top 5 at the Twin Ports Open. And they had 13 top 10 finishes in 9 events as well. Haley Selly and Josie Aitken went 2nd and 3rd in the 800-meter run. In the 300, Amelia Congrove grabbed 4th, along with taking 16th in the 600-meter dash preliminaries, 2 spots ahead of Jaden Wardars, who had 18th, and also took 13th, by the way, did Jaden in the 200-meter dash. Gabrielle Wilson was the solo hurdler for BSU, taking 6th in the 600-meter hurdles as well. Now they're going to head to Moorhead next weekend for the Cobber Alumni Open at Concordia College there, and we'll see what happens for the Beavers. Also want to talk about Catherine Freymiller, who had the 2026 part of the season off on a high note. She got 2nd in the pole vault with a 3-meter personal best. Allison Levine joined in from the pit with a 5th place long jump, and from the throwing circles, Trista Bilden led all throwers in the shot put with 11.9 meter toss. 3 more Beavers finished in the top 10. Hannah Baker marking an 11.4 meter personal record in 3rd. Kate Martin's 4th place finish, season best for her at 11.10 meters. Josie Rydstead 6th place, 10.9 meter personal best from the weight throw circle. Hannah Baker found her name on the NCAA Division II rankings with a 15.6 meter throw, taking 2nd. And Ella Betcher, Kate Martin, and Emma Green each joined the top 10 list as well, wrapping things up. So congratulations to all of them. So looking at that, they have coming up next week at Concordia. Then they go to Grand Forks on January 30th and 31st for the UND Open. February 7th, they're at NDSU for the Bison Open. And then at Mankato on Valentine's Day for the Ted Nelson meet, and wrapping up their regular season schedule on February 20th, a month from today, at the UND Tune-Up NSIC Indoor Championships, February 27th and 28th. No outdoor meets on their schedule here. These are all indoor. So it'll probably refresh once that part of the season gets going, but there's where things stand. Ian, as we wrap up the show, what else do people need to know?
Well, we've got a couple of spring sports right around the corner, believe it or not, CJ, just here in mid-January. Tennis, just about 10 days away from where we're at right now, and women's softball, 16 days away. So just a couple of weeks for these spring sports that are going to be starting up. Pretty exciting spring seasons in the air. You wouldn't know it based off the fact that you wake up, it's like negative 15 out. But yeah, it's
colder, by the way.
Only getting colder. Yeah, exactly. That's how it feels. That's how it feels so far. But
I think we should say that coming up the following weekend, Bemidji State women's hockey having that opportunity in the Hall of Fame Classic against Minnesota State in Grand Rapids on Saturday, January 31st. It's going to be really cool. So start making those plans to head over to Grand Rapids and check that out. So that's pretty much the last thing kind of on our list. I know you're possibly planning on heading that direction. So
yeah, I should be heading up there for that. That's the plan as of right now. We'll see. But I don't see any obstacles in my way next weekend for that. So should be in Grand Rapids for those games. But yeah.
All right, wrapping things up, it's the Beaver Banter podcast brought to you by Bemidji State Alumni and Foundation. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.